Um, Looking out at you, I'm going to use a phrase that my dad said, there's pretty many people out here. Good morning, in case you don't know, I'm Joan. Henry is my dad. And my dad did not dwell on the negative. He didn't even go there. Every day held great significance as he dated everything. If you look in the memory room, you'll see he dated everything from births, deaths, what he bought, where he bought it, gifts he received, everything. In loving life and everything in it, he saw that life became even more rewarding as he grew older. My brother Todd, his wife June, Brandon, Caitlin, Shauna, and Kyle, and G and Katie helped arrange some special days for my dad. They realized back at Christmas that it was actually my dad's 100th Christmas. So they started this, it's your 100th Christmas and your 100th New Year. So we've been celebrating the 100th all year long because no one was more excited about being 100 than my dad. Why I wanted to speak first was because I wanted to take time to sincerely thank everyone who has given him their attention, their interest, their support, his countless listeners, the authors who came seeking information and photographs, and especially the towns of Sodus Point and Marion for including him in your murals. Honor Flight, Lighthouse Museum, Sodus Bay Historical Society, Chamber of Commerce, Neighborhood Association, Ontario Pathways, and numerous others, please forgive me if I missed you, who helped him preserve history. My dad had many sayings that he called on, and he would say things like, I'm pretty well acquainted with that. And I loved it when he would tell someone that because he would have his own take on things, and I'd think, oh no, here we go, he's going to tell him the way it is. But he'd start out and he'd preface it with, I'm pretty well acquainted with that. So he was acquainted with most of you, but we may not be, and you may not know his family because you knew the business side of him with his coal bin and his railroad things. But I wanted to take a minute for us all to see who is here. So I want to start with, if you are a Zerbe, or if you are related to the Zerbe family in any way, you call them dad, grandpa, uncle, Henry, cousin, whatever, uncle, please stand up so everybody can see Henry's family.
Oh my gosh.
He had a very supportive family, but that's not, I don't want to make light of his friends, followers, neighbors. So at this point in time, I would like to see all his friends or his followers, his groupies, anyone that came and listened to his stories. Would you please stand up? And some of you have come a great distance. I know one person came from Kentucky. Was it Kentucky? Kentucky. And he was just here a few weeks before my dad wasn't here with us anymore. So thank you all for coming. All the medical staff, is there anyone here from his medical staff? I don't know if I saw anybody. I know Doc Peachy's here. The Lighthouse, anyone here from the Lighthouse?
Yes.
We've got a few people from the Lighthouse, thank you. Anyone from the Chamber of Commerce or the fire department or the village, thank you all. His life was so rich because of all of you. He used simple phrases when he talked, and if you knew him, you would probably have heard him say, not only I'm pretty well acquainted with that, I'd just like to say, and he'd say, may I ask? He always, to me, I think in my head, inquiring minds want to know, and he wanted to know everything. So he'd ask something, and then he'd say, may I ask? So, not really. Yes and no. I can't put my finger on it. June's favorite one was that when he started to have some health issues, he would go to the doctor, and when they said, Henry, how are you doing? He would always say, you tell me. It's like, isn't that what I'm here for? He loved to say, oh boy, and a conversation with Henry would not be complete without kunst je mikkefunga and ja wendat de blijven. And that was a Pennsylvania Dutch saying that means, if I didn't murder it terribly, it means, can you catch flies? And the response would be, if they sit still. Now, I'm going to tell you a real quick little story, my favorite Henry story, and he's heard me tell it so many times. When he was 98, he had his first real health issue. And we were in the hospital, and the doctor said to him, Henry, I want you to sign a DNR, because you might not make it through the night. And he said, I'm not ready yet. And the doctor looked at me and said, what are we going to do about this? He's 98. And I said, I know he's 98, but he still wants to be here. I know this is true. So he said, well, I guess we have to go with plan B. So they decided after a little time to do a pacemaker. So they sent him to another hospital to get his pacemaker, and he was waiting to have that put in. And the surgeon stopped in. He was all ready for surgery. He had the funny hat on. And the surgeon said, this is the device I'm going to put in your chest. And my dad put his hand up, laying down, like, no. And I thought, he's changing his mind. And I knew he wouldn't give up. So he said, what's the battery life, may I ask? And the doctor said, 10 years. And he said, is that all? And the surgeon looked at me like, are you kidding? And I'm like, he's not kidding. And so he said, I've got one man that has had it in for 12 years. And you see my dad doing the math, 98, 12. And his hand goes down, and he says, okay. My dad was so looking forward to being 100. He would say to everyone, even if we were in the dollar store, if we were at the hospital, or the doctor's office, to anybody he saw on the street, how old do you think I am? And they'd say, what is he saying? And I'd say, he wants you to guess his age. And then he'd hold them by the arm and he'd say, I'm going to be 100. He just wanted that 100 so bad. I want to remind everyone to sign the guest book, and it's very important to my mom. I know she'll sit and read it over and over again, and drop a memory in the memory jar if you're so inclined. Chat with our family in the memory room or wherever you can find us. I want to remind you that my dad was a very faithful man. He was a member of the Sodus Point, a proud member of the Sodus Point United Methodist Church for over 50 years. He faithfully attended every week he possibly could. He served on their council. He was an usher. He was a communion steward. At this time, it's my pleasure to turn the celebration over to Pastor Jules, the pastor of the Sodus Point United Methodist Church. She comes to us every Sunday from Greece, New York.
So I was thinking about, how do you take a few moments to express the extent of someone's life, 100 years in the making? And I struggled with it, like, what do I include, what do I exclude? And I had a brainchild with Grace the other night. And so we went and we did a little field trip within her house. And we pulled different things that actually spoke to me and to Grace about the type of person that Henry was. And so just like Henry liked to always have like a conversation piece, this is an honor of Henry and his conversation pieces that we're going to share. I'm going to share it with you. Before I begin, though, I wanted just to open it with an opening prayer. Let us pray. Gracious and loving and giving God, thank you for the gift of Henry, and thank you for this time that we're able to get together and celebrate. May our hearts be filled with love, and may our minds be filled with wonderful memories of how Henry was such a gift to us, to this community, and to this world. May this time be a time of celebration, and Lord, may you help those hearts that are sad get through this day and lift them up into the celebration that Henry so wanted to have, and that I'm sure that he's just overjoyed knowing that we are together and we are celebrating his wonderful milestone. In his name, amen.
Amen.
So as I was preparing, I couldn't help myself, but I got some quotes and some jokes I'm going to pepper in between. Where the train and the tracks or the path of our lives follow. In control at dispatch is God, and he is overseeing each of our movements and coordinating what happens. When a train goes through a tunnel and it gets dark, you don't throw away the ticket and jump off, do you? You sit still and trust the engineer. We thank God for guiding and blessing us this time. So just like Henry, I brought some of Henry's interesting items to share with you to just give you a little glimpse into Henry. He so loved to find and share conversation pieces with others. So I'm going to start out with some that you may or may not know. The first one I'm sharing is, what do we see here?
Marbles.
Marbles. This is a small portion of the marbles that we have. And the irony is, and I said to Grace, I said he never lost his marbles. You know? But did he even put them into this rolling pin?
That was very witty.
So one of the first things that caught my eye was this little guy. And I kept looking at him, and I just had to bring him. And I think because he reminded me of Henry. Henry loved hats. In fact, Grace showed me a picture, and she said, "Which one's Henry? Which one's Henry?" And I said, "It's got to be the one with the hat." And it was. So here he had this down in his cave room. He had this little figurine, and it just reminds me of him.
And we don't know why.
And we don't know why he picks these things. Again, this is a small portion. So one of the things that I heard that he loved to do is he would love to pick something up at a sale, and he didn't know what it was, and he'd come and he'd say to everyone, "What do you think this is? What is this?" So I saw this and I'm like, I don't even know what this is. So I just heard somebody.
Toaster.
It's a toaster?
Toaster.
All right. Okay. I thought it held a can or something. So he had this hanging up. He had lots of things, but I picked out something I wasn't sure what it was. Another thing that he loved to do is he loved to do woodwork. And this kind of goes along with the same theme, because I couldn't figure out what this is. Actually, you know what? I just found something on here. It says pie remover.
Yeah, that's what.
Oh, it's a pie remover. Okay. Now, this is something that he made. I liked the color, and I just kept looking at it like, what is this? It does have a heart, and one of the things he loved to do is he loved to do woodwork and make things, and a lot of them had hearts in them. So I'm not exactly sure what this is. It can be a hanger. I was trying to figure that out, but maybe that'll be a good discussion piece later on when you're visiting with people. What do you think this is? Because I'm sure he's up there wondering, so what do you think it is? we found this light switch, and this was kind of off in the corner. And is there something I can do about that? I'll just try to, can you hear me from here? Okay. It says, out in the lights.
Yeah.
Out in the lights. Pennsylvania Dutch. He always held Pennsylvania in his heart. It never left him. And he would, sometimes when he would talk, I have said that I couldn't quite understand him at times, but I would just smile. But as time went on, I got to understand his language, like a mother gets to understand how her child talks. So towards the end, I actually got to understand a lot of what he was saying. In the beginning, I didn't always understand. But the one thing I always saw was he loved Pennsylvania. He loved the roots of his family. He loved being able to talk to people about where did you come from. And he was sincerely interested. When I was visiting with him at the hospital one time, there was an aide that came in. And the very first thing he said to her, he wanted to know where her family came from. And he was honestly really interested. You could tell he was interested. And he smiled and he asked all these questions. And to have somebody just really interested in you, that was Henry. Henry was so interested in everyone, not just some people, but everyone. And he wanted to know where you came from. And he was always proud where he came from as well. He had a sense of humor. I had to bring this. It is a little picture he had hanging in his cave. Cows may come and cows may go, but the bull around here goes on forever. I'm not making these things up. One of the things I saw was multiple of these. And I think this really represents who he is. He was full of heart, and at the center of his heart, he was a man full of faith. And he lived out his faith with his love and sharing who he was and sharing the gentleness and the lovingness of our God. So, a couple more things. So, I think I can.
Yeah.
This says, Peep, peep, Thomas is a cheeky, fussy little engine. He often gets into scrapes, usually by being overeager to do things best left to bigger, more sensible engines. But clouds never last long in Thomas's life, and he's soon up and about doing his part on his own branch line, of which he is very proud. And Henry was very proud of where he worked, of his history with the Pennsylvania Railroad, and anything to do with trains and railroads. He also had a little lamp here, and I was thinking about this, and how he really brought a light wherever he went. He brought a light in his discussions and in his way of being, but he also just shined that light, and his light actually shined much brighter as a result of getting involved with the Sodus Point Lighthouse Association. It actually changed his life from what I understand. He was happy before, but his passion just seemed to just burst open when he got involved with that. He had little quirky things, lots of little M&Ms. And I was like, why does he like these little M&M things? And then it occurred to me, he liked sweets, and he was a sweet person, but he also liked the unusual, those things that were just unusual and that just caught his eye. He has some SpongeBob things. I didn't even know who SpongeBob was till not too long ago, but he did. He had a bunch of erasers, but he had this one that says, "For big mistakes." He never had to use it though. Okay. A joke about marbles. A railroad engineer must be sure not to lose his train of thought, or he might go down the wrong track. All right, guess that was a dud. Let's see here. One of the things I found was that I lost was some batteries that he had, and I've never seen batteries that had characters on them. He had batteries like those AA batteries with trolls on them. It's like, where do you get those? I've never seen that. Life of Henry was like a coal train at a crossing, keeps coming and coming and coming. And one of the things that struck me too was he was all about planes, trains, and automobiles. He loved to move. He loved transportation. And boy, did he move. He walked fast, he worked fast. And when I saw a picture, in here is a video, if you get a chance, of really what it must have been like for him, because he shoveled coal. He shoveled coal, and he did it the whole trip. And he talked about how he just worked, he would work for so many hours, and then to get home, he'd have to take a train home from wherever he was, and get up the next day and do it again. You know, that takes a lot of dedication, and that's what he did. And I find it kind of ironic that he loves Hot Wheels and Matchbox cars, because that can also describe a train, can it? Think about it. Hot Wheels and Matchboxes. And he drove up till he was 99 years old. Think about that. So that's my bit right now. More will be coming. But I wanted to invite his little baby sister here. She's going to share some memories and some insights for us. And again, Henry so loved his family, and we're just so happy you're here and you can share. Would you please give a round of applause for Patsy?
Thank you very much. Henry was my brother, and I was very, very proud to be in the family. There were 9 of us in the family. My mom and pop had 6 brothers in a row, and then there were 3 sisters, and I was considered the youngest and the baby and the spoiled brat. Well, what happened is I was very young, and Henry would try to reminisce about the good old days, and I would say, I'm sorry, but that was in 1935, and I wasn't born until 1937. So there was quite an age difference between my oldest brother and myself. And 3 brothers were in the service at the same time, as you have seen in a photo back in here. And it was the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th brothers that were in the service. I was 4, and they were 18, 19, and 21. So I really never got to know my brothers because they were in the service. When they came home, there was a relative that had contact with the railroad. And because he had contact with the railroad, all of them went to get jobs on the railroad. And Jay went to Philadelphia, and he worked on the railroad. And Henry came along with Reuben. And the both of them went to Elmira and they got jobs in Elmira on the railroad. Well, that was the law as far as they were concerned. They both had very reliable, very dependable, very loving jobs as far as they were concerned. Henry would come home even though he was in Elmira because he did have a friend at home and he wanted to see her. But during this time, when he came home, Pop expected him to work. And we lived on a little farm. And Henry was expected to do baling up the hay, baling up the straw, combining, digging potatoes, putting the straw and the hay away, feeding all the animals like the pigs and the horse and the cow and so forth. And he dug in diligently. He was a great and had a great work ethic. Never did Pop question his work ethic. But Henry started not to come home so much because he found the love of his life. And obviously it was Grace. And they married. And I always thought they were the perfect couple. They were so loving to each other throughout their marriage. And I was so happy for Henry and for Grace. And of course, soon they had 2 children. Well, the children became wonderful, wonderful parents. And I was so proud for Henry's sake. He was a disciplinarian, but very low key. He was faithful, he was outgoing, he was always positive, he always looked on the bright side of life, he was kind, he was generous. I could say that cliche every time, but you've always read it or see it in an obituary. But Henry definitely was one of a kind. I would say after his passion with his family, and that was of utmost importance to him. Another thing I want to mention about the utmost importance is that he had a great relationship not only with his wife, his son, and his daughter, but he had the relationship with all the grandchildren and the great-grandchildren. And believe it or not, and this doesn't happen that often either, with the in-laws, David and June. He loved them and got along very, very well with them. Well, Henry's passion was the trains. He loved his work. How many people can say that? How many people can say, I love to go to work? He would talk about the trains like it was yesterday. Here he's retired, 35 years, but he had written down what number train it was, where the destination was, when he was coming back, and every little detail. And if he didn't know the details, Grace said he demanded a shirt that had 2 pockets, and one pocket had this little log, and the log would say all the information about the trains. So if he forgot March 3rd, 1978, he could look it up and immediately say, this is the train I rode, and this is the destination I was at that time. And he was fascinated to work with the trains. So he was overjoyed. And you know, he got a pass when he retired. And this pass gave him an opportunity to go anywhere in the United States, free. He used it twice. He used it twice. Can you hear me back? Okay, thank you. Guess where he came to? Poughkeepsie, New York, where I live. He and Grace came twice. That's obviously really abusing the ticket, the free ticket. Okay, well, I must say I want to talk about Henry's proudness. There were accomplishments that he was extremely proud of. And the first one was the fact that he got to serve his country. And he was very, very proud of that. And he was very proud that his two brothers also got the opportunity to serve. The next one was sometimes an elementary teacher would ask him to speak to the students about the trainings. Well, he would be delighted and would tell me about the fact that not only did he get to speak, guess what? They paid him. He couldn't believe it. He got paid for teaching. Oh, the next proud moment is the lighthouse. Was he proud that he could be there and he could be an ambassador and he had his apparel right in that museum. And we had to go and we had to check it out and we were as proud as Henry as far as we were concerned. This was a proud moment for all of us. The next thing I felt was that Todd has the opportunity to take him to Washington, D.C. in honor of his serving the country. He talked for weeks and months about that trip and about how the government did everything right, how they saw the museums, how they saw the statues, how they went to the monuments, and all the lectures that he went to. He was so very, very proud that he had the opportunity to go to Washington. And the last thing is the mural. He was so proud again that someone from Tennessee was going to paint a mural on Route 14, and he would be able to have his picture in the right-hand side of the mural. Well, the woman that was painting it asked him to check it out and see if everything was right. Well, Henry had 3 suggestions immediately. Number 1, it has to be what railroad?
Oh, yeah.
Pennsylvania! Pennsylvania Railroad had to be written on it. Number 2, smoke had to be coming from the smokestack. And number 3, anybody know?
The number.
Henry had to be there.
Pardon?
Henry had to be there.
I'm sorry, I
Henry had
didn't.
to be there.
He was.
Number 3 was what?
He didn't have a hat on. And he needed that hat. Okay. Hat was on, and it's fine now. Okay, and from that, they declared a Henry Zerbe Day, and they gave him the key to the city. The last thing, obviously, was a letter from Trump, 100 years. They gave it to him early because they knew that he wasn't well, and Joan and Todd informed the government that they don't know if Henry will survive that long, and it's something that he looked forward to so much. So he did receive a letter, and he was blessed with a great life. I just want to say that, Henry, we loved you always, we still love you, we will miss you. And death leaves a hurt that no one can heal. But love leaves memories that no one can steal. Thank you.
So, I've been told that I need to move away from the speaker, so we're gonna move this over to the other side. Yeah. if this works. Life is like a train station. People come and go all the time, but the ones that wait for the train with you are the ones that are worth keeping in it. When Henry got involved with the Lighthouse Museum, Henry became a beacon like a lighthouse, sharing himself, his memories, and his passion for history, the railroad, and his connection with others. We're fortunate and it is an honor to have the director of the Sodus Point Lighthouse, Joe O'Toole, here to share. Would you please join?
Hello, friends. As Pastor Jewell said, I'm Joe O'Toole, and I'm the director of the Lighthouse for 8 years now. I'm very honored that I was asked to speak today, and I'm also, for those who know me, a bit of a linguist. So I'd like to say that the term eulogy comes from the Greek meaning speaking well or good words. And I have nothing but good words to say about Henry, and have never heard him say anything but good words about other people. As you may have noticed, Henry liked to chat a lot. A lot. He would come to the museum and always want to check on our coal trestle model and railroad artifacts, especially one item in particular. We have a mannequin in that room wearing Henry's railroad uniform. Of course, the mannequin doesn't look anything like him. It's about 1.5 feet taller, very, very pale, and I think it may even have blue eyeshadow, which I don't recall him ever wearing. But in any case, I named the mannequin Henry. And I used to joke with Henry and say, "Boy, Henry, you know you're really old if your clothes are in a museum." Every evening when I'm leaving the lighthouse for the night, I check all of the rooms in the museum. And every evening when I'm in that room with that mannequin, I say, "See you later, Henry." And I always thought I would. He would come to the museum again, and we'd sit on the front porch, and we would talk, and he'd tell me all the stories about his time riding the rails. Fun times and mishaps, too. He would also ask tons of questions. Or if we were particularly busy at the museum that day, he would go back to his room, and he would regale visitors with his stories. I don't think they quite understood everything either, but they were polite, and many of them wanted their picture taken with him. He had a wealth of information to share. He was a deep well of stories when it came to our local history. And I could ask him to clarify a date or about some aspect of how the coal trestle worked, and he always could. And he was a deep well of local history, but he was more than that to me. He was my friend. Every time I saw him, I would feel lighter and happier and have a smile on my face. And we chatted about serious things, and we laughed about trivial things. He would talk about his time in the service and his time riding the rails. And of course, he would talk about race. Some days we would be talking for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes or so. And I would ask about race, and he'd say, "Oh, she's out in the car." And I'd say, well, let's go say hi to her. And I hope at least you cracked the window open. So we never know quite how our words and actions will affect other people. And I'd like to say that Henry changed me. I didn't see an elderly man or a man who spoke with a funny Pennsylvania Dutch accent. I saw a friend, and I'm honored to have known him. As I ride the rails through life, I'll carry my bags full of memories with me. And I'd like to tell Henry, thanks for the ride together. I'm fortunate when I'm at the Lighthouse Museum that I can see that mannequin named Henry, and I can remember my friend every day. See you later, Henry.
A man was going by train from LA to Chicago, and he kept getting off at every station to buy a ticket till the next station. When the train reached Chicago, the man's co-passengers asked him why he kept on buying tickets instead of just buying a ticket for the entire trip. And the man replied that his doctor had advised him against taking long journeys. Henry always thought he had way more time. And he told me, probably about 2 months before he passed, he said, "I think I got at least 3 more years in me." He always thought he had more time, and it was through his love of life. It wasn't through a fear of leaving, but it was in a joy of staying here and being part of everyone's lives and people. Henry loved history, and he really wanted to keep history alive. And so I would like to welcome up here Bruce Farrington, the historian for Sodus. Please join me in welcoming.
Former historian, that honor now goes to Tom Lighton. When Henry passed away, I had a hard time imagining what Sodus Point would be like without him. He's an icon of this town. Henry was the only living person ever whose image was put on any of our historic murals. And that was an honor he certainly deserved. And funny story about that mural was that, as has been mentioned before, the artist that was doing that mural was from Tennessee. And trying to do a mural that remotely added a lot of extra time onto that mural. It took over a year, almost a year and a half. And every time I ran into Henry would say, "Bruce, how's that mural coming?" And I would grab a picture of a sketch and say, "Henry, here's the sketch of the mural." And he'd say, "Okay, yeah, that looks good." And then the next time, a week or two later, he'd say, "Well, what's the newest on the mural?" And I'd say, "Well, she started painting it." And then the next time would be, "Has she finished that mural yet?" And I'd say, "Well, she's coming along pretty good on it." And then eventually I was able to say, "Henry, she's finished the mural, but it's down in Tennessee. Now we got to wait for her to bring it up." And more months went by. And then it became, "I'm not getting any younger." And I remember showing Henry a picture of it in pieces locally here. It says, "Well, we got it here, but it's in pieces. Now we got to assemble it." And Henry would say something to the effect of, "I hope I live to see it." And I remember that day when we dedicated it. And Henry was there, and he was beaming. He was so happy and so proud. And we sang, "I've been working on the railroad." And that was a good memory. And I also remember talking to Henry. And Henry loved his work more than any other person I've ever met. And I remember him telling us a story about how him and Grace had gone on a vacation once, a 1-week vacation. And about 3 or 4 days into the vacation, Henry was saying, I can't wait to get back to work. And that was not because he didn't love Grace, which he certainly did, but Grace had to share that love that Henry had for the Pennsylvania Railroad, the Pensy. And I remember all the times that we would chat, and he would tell me about the railroad. And I thank Henry, because when Henry chats about the railroad, you get to be a really good listener. A really good listener. And I remember the time that he took me down to, you call it the cave, I call it Wonderland. At the top of the stairs, I was a 60-year-old man. By the time I was downstairs, I was a 10-year-old in a candy store again. I couldn't believe how anybody could have collected all that stuff that he had down there. And I can still hear Henry saying, looky here, this is a 1957 robin-colored Bel Air with the fins. He knew every piece of that, every single piece down there. And boy, if you've never been down there, you know, he should be selling tickets to go down to see that collection of his. But how do you summarize somebody who's lived 48 days short of a century? And the words just aren't there. But I will say this about Henry. Sodus Point is a better place for Henry having been part of it. And we are all very fortunate and very honored to have known this man who shared his history and shared his love of the Pennsylvania Railroad. Thank you.
There is a wonderful article, I'm not going to read it, but if you are interested in reading a great article, the Wayne Times did an article on Henry, and it's titled, He Never Met a Train He Didn't Like. It was September 5th of 2015. It's a great article, and it also just speaks to his love of life and everything that he was involved in. So here's another quote, a railroad quote. Actually, this is kind of a life quote. Sometimes you'll never know the value of a moment until it becomes a memory. So you've heard some people share, myself included, and I know there's a lot of stories out there. And the family wanted me to open it up to anyone that would like to share a brief memory or brief story and share that with everyone in this room, because we all have one thing in common. We were all loving and impacted by Henry. So raise your hand. Just stand over here.
Say who you are. Yeah. Say your name.
I'm Melrose, Henry's great-granddaughter. I'd just like to share that I remember every Christmas when we'd go to the community center, because I wanted to go see Santa, that every time we went there, always, Henry needed to sit on Santa's lap and eat a picture.
And there's pictures to prove it. Anyone else? We can bring the microphone to you.
I'm Bill Sitzman. I'm one of the historians of the Sodus Bay area. And Henry, to me, was an adopted uncle. And I've gotten to know his family and his nieces, and they're like family to me. And he really had an impact on my life. He's a dear gentleman that I will sorely miss, but we'll keep the history going here.
for their nieces whenever they were getting married, and Uncle Henry would always give one very practical gift to every bride-to-be, and that would be a roll of toilet paper.
I'm Norma Musso Davis, and I'm the oldest of the nieces on Aunt Grace's side, and I stand to what my sister just said. I was the first shower that Aunt Grace had for the nieces. I got a roll of toilet paper. But as my other cousins came along, they got a little more than I did. I don't remember how many, it was a roll of toilet paper, but then he added a roll of paper towels, and then a box of Kleenex. So, you just got toilet paper? I don't know. Lori, what'd you get?
I got the paper towels and the toilet
See?
paper.
I just want to say that Henry was probably the last link to my dad, my Uncle Bill. They all worked together on the railroad, and every time I saw him in church on Sunday, I thought of my dad.
Nice.
Grace and Henry. I've known them 46 years. It's hard for me to think of one without the other. One of my very, very first memories of Henry, we were sitting in his kitchen. Grace and I we were there, we were chit-chatting, and Henry said, "Would you like to see my backyard? See how far back I mow." Well, having just met them, not really knowing Henry very well, I was a little leery. So I asked one of my children who were there with me, I can't remember which one, to come with me, come with us. And Henry, with his shy little smile in his jumble way, looks at me and he said, "Don't you trust me?" Well, I very soon learned Henry had a very gentle soul. He loved his family. He loved his friends. And I'm going to miss him.
Well, Henry always wanted to make 100. And I worked lots of hours on the railroad with Henry. And I was thinking about that, making 100. The first 8 hours, we got $33.66. Then we doubled through, we got $66.33. And Henry said, "Freddie, we almost made 100.
Anyone else?
My name is Charles Patrick Haley. I'm very honored to be here. I don't have the history of knowing Henry as much as many of you in the room, but nevertheless, I have the great honor of having spent time with him and Grace. 2 years ago, I came to the museum at the Lighthouse, and I've always been a Pennsylvania Railroad enthusiast, freak. My dad worked for the Pennsylvania and retired from Pennsylvania. So it's very deep for me in my soul to be around railroaders and particularly Pennsylvania people. I came here and was remarking about the coal trestle diorama at the museum. And one of the museum folks said to me, "Are you interested in railroads?" Well, I can't really say what I was going to say, but I did say, yes, I am interested in railroads. And he said, "We have a man that comes in here all the time that just loves to talk about trains." And the light bulbs went off with me. I said, my God, I found somebody that really wants to talk about trains and the Pennsylvania Railroad. I am in heaven. He said, how long are you going to be here? And I said, Well, only for a little while because I had to go to a family function. I have a lot of family in Sodus and Wolca and all around here. So I couldn't spend the time with him then. The following summer, which was last summer, I had to go to a wedding in Auburn, and I set it up with the museum, told them I was coming, that I would love to meet this man. Well, the museum said, we'll look into this. They called me back and said, we have it set up with you on Sunday morning. Right after church, Henry will come and meet with you. I became a train enthusiast when I was 12 years old, 10 years old. I love trains. And when I sat down with Henry and Grace on the porch of the museum, I don't apologize for being emotional because it's very deep for me. And you all know this. You all know Henry. I became 12 years old then. I went back to 12 or 10 years old. And I spent the whole day with them. It was a little surprising for them because I said, I'm taking you to lunch. And they took me to lunch, so to speak, emotionally, and dinner, and Christmas, and everything in between. I did write a few notes, so I didn't overlook anything. It was not a meeting by chance. I don't believe any of these things in life happen by chance. I do believe there's a reason for everything. And the reason I came back was to meet Henry and Grace. I very soon learned the grace of grace, I say, because I was welcomed as a stranger into their lives. And Henry's den down below there in the basement, I had the privilege of being there for that. And all of the stuff in the backyard, and the pride that I saw in Henry and in Grace, and the patience Grace had with the whole thing, including my enthusiasm. I too am a talker, but I learned how to exercise my listening skills that day because I was like a sponge. I just kept bringing all this stuff in. Again, folks here know what I'm saying when I speak about Henry. I was so drawn to the magnetism of the couple. That's the only way I can put it, maybe other ways, but the magnetism of them just drawing me into their life and Henry into his experiences. And we know he can relate very well of his experiences. My day was spent as a walking tour of the roundhouse, the yard office, which is the little information center, I guess, now in Sodus. And Henry would relate to me how he signed in for the cruise and all this stuff that I relate very well to, because I know all about that. I have to say thanks to whatever the powers are that brought me to meet these folks and you today. And I'm very humbled to be here. I have a saying too, I live by many of them. And one of the ones I created is always, in capital letters, always appreciated. And in capital letters, never taken for granted. So I'm glad to be here, and I am very honored to be able to speak to the family.
We have a little treat. Back in a 70s, when there was a 70th party, they were on a train, right? If I'm getting this right?
It might have been 75th, but I don't know.
I had written down 70, but he had a birthday, and they surprised him with a quartet.
Barbershop quartet.
A barbershop quartet. And so we're going to hear, going to take us back in time and hear. And please welcome, according to us, Rob, Marty, Brian, and Greg.
Just a little something here. When Henry passed away, Joni and Grace asked me to sing across from the elementary school, that cemetery there. So we did that. She was going to put on a what's this thing called?
A celebration.
Celebration of life. So she kind of asked, Joni asked me to sing, and then she told me the story about the quartet that sang on the train, and I knew all those guys. There's one fella left with the chorus. The other three moved away. And so she goes, why don't you get your quartet? You know, I said, well, I'll talk to them about it. And I mean, Greg here lives out in Brockport, you know, so that's a bit of a trip. And Webster over here and Mendon. So they were all for it, no problem. Once I told them, now I gotta hope I get through the song. Once I told them about why it was and who it was for and all that good stuff. And Henry and I used to sit in the back of the church along with Bob Slusher and we'd greet people coming in, and they kind of called us see no evil, hear no evil, and speak no evil. And that was a terrific night. We'd sit there and talk, you know, 15, 20 minutes before church started. It was a good time. And so Joni said, the other quartet sang Working on the Railroad. I told her, I said, well, that's not in our repertoire. But I'll talk to the fellas, because I had a copy of it. So I looked at it, and so we got about half of it learned for Henry. So we're going to sing, hopefully we'll sing what we know and not fall off the track. I've been working on the railroad all the livelong day. I've been working on the railroad just to pass the time away. Oh, can't you hear the whistle blowing? Rise up so early in the morn. Can't you hear the captain shouting? Dinah, blow your horn. Dinah, won't you blow? Dinah, won't you blow? Dinah, won't you blow your horn? Dinah, won't you, Dinah, won't you, Dinah, won't you, Dinah? Come on, blow your horn.
One last saying. Life is like an old-time rail journey. Delays, sidetracks, smoke, dust, cinders, and jolts, interspersed only occasionally by beautiful vistas and thrilling bursts of speed. The trick is to thank the Lord for letting you have the ride. Amen. I'm going to do a closing prayer, but before I do that, I'm going to just give you a few little instructions. Just a reminder that we do have this room back here. There's a book to sign, and because Henry so liked to keep records, please sign that book, because he would just love it, and I know that that would be such a blessing for the family. There's also that jar, big jar, for you to put a memory in there. Again, I think that that will be a blessing to the family to just pull out some of the memories that maybe you weren't able to share here today. And let's see what else. The food. The family. Do you want to say that, or do you want me to say it? So we have a wonderful feast awaiting us. And we are going to be served. Just like Henry was all about helping and serving others, his family is going to serve us. They are blessing us with this abundance of food and service. So, and while you are partaking, please share memories, see the room, And we're going to hear from the quartet that's going to sing and serenade us as we start that. And one other thing that didn't get brought up, I thought maybe you might have brought it up, but was I wanted to learn the game Rook. When I say Rook. He has so many cards, sets of Rook. And any of you that have never heard of it, I never heard of it before, but I looked into it because I love card games. And unfortunately, I never got a chance to play it with him. It was confusing because when I looked up the rules, they were totally different from what Henry was telling me. So I never really got to play. So the only way I know how to play is what I watched online on YouTube. But maybe sometime I can play with you. Yes. But Henry, as you can tell, was such an inspiration. He touched the lives and hearts of so many people. And one of the things that I want you to remember is that when you leave here, you have the opportunity to be an inspiration to others, to share your heart with others, to use Henry's example, to not just go through the motions, but share your emotions and share yourself with others. And when you go by the two murals, he's got one here on 14 and one in Marion, because he loves hats, I'm going to challenge you to just, even if you're not wearing one, tip your hat to Henry when you go by and remember him and how special he was and how special you are. Let us pray. Thank you, Lord, for this time together, and thank you for helping us to celebrate the life of Henry. We're so grateful that you have given us time with him and that you have given us so many blessings. We ask that you bless the food that we're going to have and that you would bless each person here. You would give them safe journeys and that you would just touch their hearts in a way that they walk out of here feeling the love and the grace and mercy that you just so wish all of us to have. And may they have a smile on their face and a twinkle in their eye, just like Henry. Amen. Amen.